He came home to fire the maid. The kitchen was flooded, the twins were shouting, and water was everywhere. But what Leonard James saw that day wasn't just a mess. It was the first sign that his sons, the ones who hadn't smiled since their mother died, were still in there somewhere. And the woman kneeling beside them. She wasn't just fixing a leak. She was doing something he couldn't. She was bringing them back to life. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not that day. Not at that hour. The meeting had been cancelled. The skies over the city were coming undone. And somewhere between the airport and the hotel, something in him shifted. "Take me home," he told the driver. No reason, no explanation, just impulse. The mansion stood at the top of the hill. 3 stories of silence and shadow. No toys on the lawn, no lights in the windows, just stone, just glass, just memories that hadn't moved since the day everything changed. Leonard stepped through the front door expecting nothing. No voices, no footsteps, just the usual stillness that followed him through every room like a second shadow. But today, it wasn't still. Today there was a sound. Low at first, muffled, then louder. Laughter. Not polite, not forced. Real. He froze in the hallway. It couldn't be. Not them. Not here. He followed it. Slowly. Each step heavier than the last. Past the cold hallway, past the family room nobody used anymore, and into the kitchen where light flickered and water spread in reckless arcs across the tile. The cabinet beneath the sink was wide open. Pipes dripped wildly. The floor was soaked. And there, in the middle of it all, were his sons. Alive. Not in the way you'd expect. Not just breathing. Alive. Knees on the floor. Toy wrenches in hand. Yelling over each other. Pretending to fix a rocket. Faces red with joy. Soaked to the skin. Mouths wide with laughter he hadn't heard in nearly half a year. And beside them, sleeves rolled, curls wet, smile unshaken, was her. Jennifer Davies. 28, hired by his assistant. He barely remembered shaking her hand. She didn't see him right away. She was too busy dodging water, helping the boys, trying to keep the cabinet from collapsing under the weight of imagination. When she did look up, she froze. For just a moment. But she didn't apologize. She didn't explain. "Mr. James," she said softly, out of breath. "We had a little situation." Owen popped out from under the sink, eyes beaming. "Daddy, we're fixing the spaceship." Leonard didn't answer. He didn't know how. He looked at Jennifer, then at his boys, then at the floor soaked in water and something else, something warm that didn't belong in a house like this anymore. Jennifer reached for a towel. He stopped her. "Leave it," he said. And that moment, that silence between them, it wasn't just about pipes. It was about something bigger, something none of them had words for yet. Owen waved a plastic wrench toward him. "Captain, we need you!" Leonard stared down at his shoes, at the mess, at the boys who'd been strangers in their own home. And then, he knelt, reporting for duty. Jennifer didn't speak, but her smile softened just enough to say, this wasn't part of the job, but maybe it was part of the healing. And Leonard, he felt it. Something shift, something start. This wasn't a repair job. It wasn't a lucky accident. It was a turning point. He just didn't know it yet. If you've ever lost something and didn't know where to begin again, stay with us. And if this story touches you, like it touched them, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who needs hope today and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes, healing comes from the places you least expect. Leonard hadn't knelt on the kitchen floor in months. Not since the night Claire fell. Not since the ambulance lights painted the hallway walls red and blue, and everything stopped moving. Now, here he was. One knee in water, one hand wrapped awkwardly around a toy wrench. A 6-year-old shouting orders like a sergeant, and somehow, the world didn't collapse. "Turn it left," Owen yelled, soaked shirt sticking to his chest. "No, your other left." Oliver leaned in, eyes wide. "The water monster's coming. Block the pipe, quick." Leonard tightened his grip on the wrench, even though it wasn't touching anything real. He played along. "Captain reporting," he said, voice gravel low, like it hadn't been used in days. "What's the mission?" Both boys lit up like he'd handed them the sun. Jennifer was crouched behind them, hands on her knees, hair clinging to her cheek like ivy. She wasn't directing, she wasn't managing. She was there, present, effortless, like joy was something she carried in her back pocket. At one point, a sponge slipped from Owen's hand and splattered against Leonard's shoulder. He flinched. Jennifer's eyes darted to his, ready, prepared for a scolding. But Leonard only stared at the sponge, then at his sons. Still laughing, still alive. The seconds stretched like a string pulled too tight. "Sorry," Jennifer said quietly, stepping forward. "I'll get a towel." He didn't answer, didn't move. The part of him that wanted to yell, that needed to stay in control, was still loading. But the rest of him, the deeper part, was listening to something he hadn't heard in months. The sound of his boys existing. The leak sputtered again, loud, random, defiant. Oliver leapt back, shrieking. Jennifer laughed, really laughed, covering her mouth, but failing to hide the joy rising from somewhere real. Leonard looked at her, really looked. She wasn't afraid of the mess. She wasn't rushing to apologize. She was rooted, not a guest, not a stranger. Something else. Something he couldn't name. "Mr. James," she started again, softer now, more careful, but he cut her off without meaning to. "I said, leave it." Jennifer blinked, then nodded once. No argument, no defense. She let the towel fall back to her side and stepped away. Leonard turned back to the boys. Owen was now spinning in a puddle, pretending it was a whirlpool. Oliver slid across the floor with a spoon like a sword. There was a time when that kind of noise would have made him clench his jaw, but right now, it sounded like music. "I think the monster's retreating," Owen shouted. "Probably scared of your dad," Jennifer murmured behind him, smiling into her sleeve. Leonard glanced over his shoulder. Their eyes met, for less than a second. She didn't say more, but something in her gaze made the air in the room feel heavier. Not bad, just real. And then, as if sensing the moment had stretched too far, she gathered the boys with a whisper and guided them gently away. "All right, engineers," she said. "Back to base." The twins followed her down the hall, barefoot and dripping, giggling all the way. Leonard stayed in the kitchen, alone now, knee still wet, toy wrench still in hand. He looked down at the floor, then up at the ceiling, then at the soundless space they'd just left behind. The house felt different, not healed, not whole, but cracked open, just enough to let something in, something warm, something human. And somewhere deep in that silence, a man who had forgotten how to feel realized he didn't want the silence back. Not tonight, not anymore. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence Leonard had grown used to. This one felt different, less like absence, more like something catching its breath. He stood alone in the kitchen, one hand resting on the edge of the counter, still wet from the flood. The light above the sink flickered faintly, too old, too tired to fight the storm outside. Rain ticked gently against the windows now, steady, calming. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. His shoes were soaked, his knees ached, and the wrench, the plastic one, still sat in the middle of the floor like a forgotten memory. Leonard finally exhaled, then turned, slowly, and walked through the hall. The marble echoed under his feet. Everything echoed in this house. Grief had made sure of that. But tonight, it felt softer somehow. He passed the family room. Claire's piano sat untouched in the corner, its keys long sealed under dust. A blanket lay folded across the back of the couch, the kind with cartoon dogs. He didn't remember buying it. At the foot of the stairs, something caught his eye. A crayon, green, blunt-tipped, abandoned near the baseboard like it had rolled away from a tiny hand. He stared at it for a long time, then climbed the stairs without picking it up. On the second floor, The hallway stretched ahead, lined with dim sconces and framed photos from another lifetime. Claire's smile, the twins as toddlers, a beach trip from 5 summers ago, all sunburnt shoulders and melted ice cream. He stopped outside the boys' room. The door was cracked just slightly, like it always used to be when Claire insisted they keep the monsters out but let the dreams in. He leaned in, just enough to listen. Whispers, Jennifer's voice, low, even, steady, and the occasional rustle of blankets. He didn't open the door, didn't intrude, just stood there, one hand braced against the wall like the weight of being near them might knock him over. Then, something else, a faint tune, barely a hum, a melody with no words. Jennifer, singing softly, almost under her breath. Not for show, not for thanks, just singing. It wasn't Claire's voice, it wasn't supposed to be, but it filled the hallway like warm light under a door. Leonard closed his eyes. For a moment he let the sound settle into his chest, not fixing anything, not solving it, just there, present. Later that night, he wandered back into the kitchen. The water had been mopped up, not perfectly. A few streaks still glistened on the tile. A sticky note was stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a smiley face. Child's handwriting, crooked, uneven. Today was fun. Signed, O.O. Leonard didn't touch it, didn't smile. But he stood there a while longer than he meant to, one hand on the counter, trying to remember the last time the word fun had lived in this house. Trying to understand why this note, this little scrap of yellow paper, made his throat feel tighter than it should. And somewhere down the hallway, past the sleeping rooms and broken habits, a woman who was never meant to be more than help was humming in the dark. The morning came grey and slow, the kind of morning that didn't ask permission. Leonard sat at the far end of the kitchen table, black coffee in one hand, the same unread newspaper in the other. Steam curled into the air. The twins were still upstairs, still in that in-between state where dreams hadn't let go yet, and Jennifer was humming again. Not a melody he recognized, not even loud, but steady, like a thread that kept the air from unraveling. She moved through the kitchen with quiet focus, hair tied up, bare feet, sleeves already rolled. The kind of comfort that didn't ask for approval. She didn't speak, she just moved, like the kitchen already knew her. Leonard kept his eyes on the paper but didn't read. He just listened. Then it happened. A sound, not loud, but unmistakable. Porcelain shattering on tile. Jennifer gasped, and everything stopped. He looked up. She was frozen. A broken plate lay in pieces across the floor, deep blue shards fanned out like a burst of glass. Her hands hovered in the air, shaking slightly. She didn't say a word at first, didn't move. Leonard stood, not quickly, not slowly, just deliberately. Jennifer dropped to her knees, voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Her fingers reached out to gather the edges, careful, trembling. Leonard stepped closer, then stopped, his eyes locked on the plate. Not just any plate. Claire's, hand-painted, blue and white, a gift from Italy on their 5th anniversary. She used it for pancakes on Sundays. The twins called it her magic plate. Jennifer paused, one hand hovering over a sharp piece, her breath caught in her chest. Leonard crouched beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, just the sound of rain on the windows and the hush of memory thick in the room. Jennifer looked up, eyes wide, full of apology. "I didn't mean to," she started. He cut her off, not with words, but with action. He reached out, not to push her hand away, but to help. His fingers brushed hers as they both reached for the same shard. The moment lingered, longer than it should have. Jennifer lowered her eyes. Leonard picked up a piece and turned it slowly in his hand, the edge catching the light. "She loved this one," he said quietly. Jennifer nodded, unsure if he wanted comfort or distance. "I should have been more careful," she said. "No," Leonard said, placing the shard gently in her hand. "You shouldn't have to tiptoe around ghosts." She looked up at him, startled, uncertain. "I'm not trying to erase anything," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I just want the boys to feel safe. That's all." Leonard nodded once, then helped her gather the last of the pieces into a folded towel. No ceremony, no lecture, just silence, shared, human. When she stood, she carried the bundle like something sacred. He watched her walk to the trash bin, then pause. She didn't throw it away. She placed it gently on the counter, folded, unresolved, and maybe that's what it was. Some things weren't meant to be cleaned up right away. Some things had to sit. The backyard had always been her favorite place, not Jennifer's, Claire's. She used to spend hours in the garden, bare hands in the soil, sunlight on her shoulders, the boys waddling after her with toy shovels and bug jars. She once called it her quiet church. But since the funeral, no one had stepped out there. Not the landscapers, not the twins, not even Leonard. It was just a patch of earth now, wild, overgrown, untouched. A graveyard of what used to bloom. She'd been chasing a soccer ball by accident too far. The back gate creaked open, and there it was. Vines had swallowed the fence. The bench was splintered, dead leaves curled in every corner, but the bones were still there, the outline of something once beautiful. She didn't call for permission. She didn't wait. The next morning she brought the twins out with gloves too big for their hands and seed packets from the corner store. Owen wrinkled his nose. "This place is gross," Jennifer smiled. "Then we'll make it ungross." Oliver poked the dirt with a stick. "Is it dead?" "No," she said. "Just sleeping." The boys didn't ask who the garden belonged to. Maybe they knew. Maybe they were too young to name it. But they followed her anyway. Together they pulled weeds, lifted rocks, discovered a worm the size of Jennifer's finger. "This is Wiggle Joe," Owen declared, cradling it like a treasure. Jennifer didn't laugh. She nodded solemnly. "An excellent name." Oliver tried to plant gummy bears. She let him. And up in the study window, hidden behind glass and shadow, Leonard watched. He hadn't meant to. He'd been walking past, caught a flicker of color through the curtain. But once he saw them, he couldn't look away. Jennifer, kneeling in the dirt, hair tied back in a red bandana. The boys, laughing, digging, living. There was no music, no talking from her, just presence. He watched her dust dirt off Oliver's cheek with the side of her hand. Not a big gesture, but gentle, natural. His hand gripped the edge of the window. He didn't know what to do with what he was feeling. Not anger, not sadness. Something quieter but heavier. That afternoon, Jennifer found him standing by the back door. The twins were inside now, eating crackers on the floor. She froze when she saw him. "You saw the garden," she said, more statement than question. Leonard nodded. She waited, for a warning, for a line drawn. But he said nothing. Then, without a word, he reached past her and picked up the watering can. He stepped out into the yard, still wearing his office shoes. The air smelled like wet earth and late October. He walked to the far edge of the garden bed, bent down, and poured a slow stream of water into a shallow hole the twins had left uncovered. A pause. Jennifer watched from the steps. After a long minute, Leonard looked up. Not at her, but somewhere else. Then finally, without turning, "She would have liked this," he said. Jennifer's voice came soft. "I think she does." Leonard didn't answer, but for the first time he didn't walk away either. He just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting something plant itself in the dirt. Not quite peace, but maybe the beginning of it. It happened on a Wednesday. Nothing unusual about the day, at least not at first. The sky was pale, the coffee too strong, and the twins were in their usual whirlwind, building forts in the living room with sofa cushions Jennifer had just fluffed. Leonard stood in the hallway, tie loose, phone in hand, pretending to check emails. But he wasn't reading. He was listening. From the other room, laughter spilled out again. That warm, tumbling kind that never asked permission. Jennifer's voice followed, gentle and sure, guiding the boys without ever raising her tone. "Be careful with the lamp, Ollie. I don't think pillows are weapons. No, Owen, don't launch your brother." Leonard's lips pressed together, trying not to smile. He didn't go in. He didn't want to break it. Later that afternoon, the boys were running circles around the dining table when Owen slipped. Not hard, but fast enough to knock his knee against the chair leg. He froze. No tears. Just silence. Jennifer was there in seconds. She knelt beside him, inspected the red mark with practiced calm, and offered a soft, "You're all right, kiddo." Owen blinked. Then he smiled. "You're like a mommy," he whispered, barely loud enough to hear. Jennifer stilled. Oliver, standing nearby, added helpfully, "Yeah, you fix everything." Owen tilted his head, thoughtful. "Your mommy Jenny fix it." The world didn't stop, but Jennifer did. She looked up, just once, and caught Leonard standing in the doorway. He hadn't moved, he hadn't spoken, but he'd heard all of it. Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came. Leonard didn't say a thing, just met her eyes. And in that glance, something fragile passed between them. Not resistance, not panic, just something unspoken. Jennifer turned back to Owen, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You're safe," she whispered, and kissed the top of his head like it was the most natural thing in the world. Leonard didn't leave the doorway, not for a while. That night, the house had settled again. Dinner was quiet but shared. The boys were tucked into bed before 9. Jennifer moved through the kitchen, wiping crumbs from the counter. Leonard walked in without warning. She looked up, surprised but not startled. Neither of them spoke right away. Then he nodded toward the hallway. "They sleep okay?" Jennifer's voice was steady. "Out cold." He nodded, tried to smile. Didn't quite manage it. She picked up a dish towel, folding it in small, precise motions. Leonard glanced toward the fridge. There, in the center, held up by a magnet shaped like a cartoon star, was another sticky note. Child's handwriting, wobbly letters. "Thank you for making the sad go away." Signed, O.O. Jennifer followed his gaze. "I didn't write that," she said gently. "I know." Leonard stepped closer. His voice was lower now, worn around the edges. "They haven't called anyone mommy since—" Jennifer didn't move, didn't respond. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. Instead, he stepped back, just one pace, and gave her space to breathe. But before he turned to leave, she said softly, "I didn't ask for that name. I wouldn't." Leonard looked at her, eyes tired but clear. "I know," he said. Then he nodded once, not as a goodbye, but something closer to permission, and walked out. Jennifer stood alone in the kitchen. The room hummed with quiet. Not cold, not empty, just real. She turned back to the fridge, fingers grazing the edge of the note, and smiled barely. It was just after midnight when the storm rolled in, not the kind that danced gently on the roof. This one growled through the walls. Thunder cracked without warning, shaking the windows in their frames. Rain hammered the house like it had something to prove. Leonard was awake. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might speak first. Claire used to hate storms, but she never showed it. She'd just pull the boys into her lap and hum some half-made lullaby until the thunder passed. Now. The house braced in silence, until it wasn't silent anymore. A sharp cry cut through the hallway. Then another, higher, panicked. Leonard was already moving. He didn't stop for shoes or a robe. He moved fast, too fast, feet pounding the hardwood, turning the corner into Owen's room just as Jennifer reached the door. They nearly collided. She looked up, eyes wide, heart clearly racing. "Owen," she whispered, breathless. He was sitting upright in bed, tears on his cheeks, clutching his blanket like it was the last thing tethering him to earth. Oliver stood nearby, sleepy and confused, rubbing his eyes. Jennifer rushed to the bed, kneeling beside him without hesitation. "Shh. You're safe," she said gently, reaching for his hand. It was just thunder. But Owen's chest heaved. His breaths came fast, shallow, frightened. "Mommy's gone," he cried out suddenly, voice cracking. "I don't want the thunder to take her too." Jennifer's face broke, not visibly, not fully. but something behind her eyes flickered. Leonard stepped inside, slow now, unsure of where to stand. Jennifer looked up at him. "He was dreaming," she whispered. "I think reliving something." Leonard didn't move, didn't know how. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Owen gently into her arms. Her hand smoothed over his damp curls, her voice soft but certain. "I've got you. I'm here." Owen buried his face in her shoulder. He didn't hesitate. He clung to her, like she'd always been there. And Leonard watched, frozen. Somewhere inside him something cracked. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was something more painful. Regret. All the nights he hadn't been there. All the moments he'd mistaken silence for healing. All the times he'd thought therapy and structure would fill the space where touch was needed. He sat down at the foot of the bed, slowly, like he didn't want to startle anyone, including himself. "Daddy." Oliver's voice was quiet. Leonard turned, offered a hand. "Come here." Oliver crawled into his lap. Jennifer's arms were still around Owen, who was beginning to calm, though his sobs hadn't fully stopped. Leonard looked at her. She looked back. Neither said a word, but in that moment, something passed between them. Not romantic, not clear, just raw understanding. Owen whispered into Jennifer's shirt, "Will you read to us?" Jennifer looked toward Leonard, unsure, but Owen was already turning, eyes heavy, voice fragile. "Daddy, can you?" Leonard froze. The book lay on the nightstand, same one Claire used to read. His hand shook when he picked it up. He opened the first page. His voice cracked on the second line, but he kept going, word by word, and no one corrected him. Jennifer leaned back, still holding Owen, her shoulder just barely touching Leonard's. Oliver curled into his father's chest, sighing quietly. The thunder rolled again, softer now, but no one flinched. And somewhere in that tiny room, pressed between old pages and new breath, a man remembered what it felt like to be needed, not as a provider, not as a protector, but as a parent. The house was still when Leonard woke. No clatter of dishes, no tiny feet pounding down the hall. Just rain, again, gentler this time, like the sky had worn itself out overnight. He sat up slowly, hand pressed to his chest like something inside him hadn't caught up yet. The book was still on the nightstand. The one he'd read from, awkwardly, haltingly, while Owen cried himself back to sleep in Jennifer's arms. He hadn't planned to stay, but once he started reading, the boys didn't let go. Neither did she. He'd fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, woke sometime before dawn, and crept out like a man unsure if the moment had really happened. Now, hours later, the air in the house felt different. Not better, just changed. He pulled on a sweater and moved through the hallway slowly, as if walking too fast might undo something fragile. The stairs creaked under his weight. No one spoke, no one called his name. But when he reached the kitchen, he stopped cold. A mug, bright, sitting on the counter like it had always belonged there. Streaks of color. A child's craft project, clearly, uneven, painted with crooked letters. Across the side, in green and blue, family. Underneath, barely legible, from OO. Leonard stared at it like it might break if he blinked. There was no note, no explanation, just the mug, and its quiet declaration of something he hadn't dared name. Jennifer's back was turned, standing by the sink, her hands busy with breakfast. The same routine she moved through every morning. Except this morning, she moved slower. Maybe she felt it too. Leonard stepped closer, but didn't speak. Jennifer noticed him only when she reached for the sugar. She turned halfway, hesitated, then offered a small, unsure smile. "They made it yesterday," she said softly. "At school. They wanted to surprise you." Leonard didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't trust his voice to hold. Jennifer looked down at her hands. They said they weren't sure if it was too much. That word hung in the air like smoke. Too much. Too much to say. Too much to hope. Too much to feel. Leonard looked at the mug again. It was imperfect, messy, and honest. He reached out, wrapped one hand around it. Warm. Still full. He took a sip. Didn't say if he liked it. Didn't have to. Jennifer turned back to the stove, but something between them stayed open. Not resolved, not clear, but open. That evening, the boys were louder than usual at dinner. Owen spilled his juice. Oliver demanded extra pancakes. Jennifer laughed and rolled her eyes. Leonard got up from the table, not to leave but to help. He refilled the pitcher without being asked, set a clean napkin at Owen's elbow, and when he sat back down, he did it slowly, intentionally. They all ate together, not perfectly, not quietly, but together. Jennifer looked across the table once, not long, not expectant, just long enough for Leonard to notice. He didn't look away, and when Owen asked if they could all go back to the garden tomorrow, Leonard was the one who answered. "Yeah," he said, soft, but certain. "Yeah, we can." Saturday morning came with sunlight. Not dramatic, not golden, just real. A soft wash through the kitchen window, steam curling from pancakes, the smell of syrup warming in the microwave. Jennifer moved quietly through the routine, spatula in one hand, mismatched socks on her feet. The radio hummed low in the background, something old and gentle. She didn't know this morning would be different. It felt like any other. Owen and Oliver had been whispering for most of the morning, giggling behind doors, racing up and down the hallway with felt markers in hand. At one point, she asked what they were doing. "Nothing," Oliver said too quickly. "We're not hiding anything," Owen added, eyes wide. Jennifer narrowed her eyes. "That convincing, huh?" They ran off laughing. She shook her head, smiling to herself. Upstairs, Leonard had woken early. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check the news, he just listened to the sound of life below him. And for once, he didn't feel like a stranger in it. He came down just as Jennifer was plating the last pancake. She glanced at him, then at the coffee already poured on the table. "I guess the usual." He nodded, then paused. "Thanks." One word. But it felt bigger than that. Before she could respond, the twins came barreling into the room, arms waving. "Come
Breathless.
see," Owen shouted. "We made something." Oliver grinned, tugging Leonard by the sleeve. Jennifer followed, heart quickening, unsure whether to laugh or brace herself. They led them to the hallway outside the playroom, and there it was, a small whiteboard, propped on a tiny easel, crooked letters scrawled in every color they could find, words that stopped the air. "Can you be our mommy?" Silence fell like a blanket. Jennifer froze. The marker slipped from Owen's hand and rolled down the hallway. No one picked it up. Leonard looked at the board, then at Jennifer. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes wide, not in shock, but in something deeper, not fear, not joy. Wait. The boys looked between them, hopeful but unsure, sensing something important had happened, but not quite understanding what. Jennifer crouched down, leveled her gaze with theirs. "Where did this idea come from?" she asked gently. Oliver shrugged. "We just thought it." Owen nodded. "You take care of us. You make pancakes, and you don't get mad when we break stuff." "And you sing," Oliver added, "even when it's dark." Jennifer looked at them like her heart was in her throat. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then Leonard stepped forward. The twins turned to him. In his hand was a small box, blue velvet, not a ring. He knelt, beside Jennifer, beside the board, beside the boys, and handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside, not jewelry, but a folded note, in Leonard's handwriting. "You already are, if you'll have us." Jennifer didn't cry right away. She looked at him, looked at the boys, and then back down at that little sentence, the one that had no timeline, no proposal, no pressure, just truth. And when the tears did come, they came quietly. Owen crawled into her lap. Oliver wrapped his arms around her waist, and Leonard stayed there, on his knees, hands resting on his thighs, not reaching, just staying. "I'm not trying to replace her," he said softly. Jennifer looked up. "I know," she whispered. "We're not replacing what we lost," Leonard added, his voice low. "We're choosing what we've found." Jennifer nodded, eyes full, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. It started with a sound, not music, not even a voice, just feet, small ones. Running down the hallway, a rhythm the house hadn't heard in what felt like years. The marble didn't echo the way it used to. Now it caught laughter, soft, fast, sometimes wild. It held stories whispered under covers, games played too loud, footsteps that didn't tiptoe around memory anymore. Claire's picture still hung in the foyer, her smile unchanging, eyes forever bright. But now, beside it, were new photos. Jennifer holding a basket of soil-stained vegetables, Leonard squinting in the sun, arms wrapped around the boys, Owen and Oliver in the garden, grinning wide, mud up to their knees. Nothing perfect, but all of it alive. Saturday mornings had their own rhythm now. Pancakes stacked too high, syrup spilled, pajamas left on chairbacks. Jennifer stood at the stove, the family mug cradled in her hands. Colors faded slightly, but still there, still bold. She took a sip, smiled to herself, and called into the living room. "Last call for breakfast." Oliver bolted in, superhero cape dragging behind him. Owen followed, clutching a wooden spoon like a sword. "You're late," she teased. "We're heroes," Owen replied. "We work nights." From the hallway, Leonard appeared, buttoning a shirt, hair still damp from the shower. He stopped for a second, just watched them. His sons, this woman, his home. He stepped into the kitchen, leaned over and pressed a kiss to Jennifer's cheek. She didn't flinch anymore when he did. She just smiled and poured his coffee. No one said it, but everyone felt it. This house had shifted. Later that day, the twins pulled him toward the garden. "Come on, Daddy," Oliver shouted. "The snapdragons are blooming," Owen added, "and Wiggle Joe got a house." Leonard followed, laughing under his breath. Jennifer trailed behind, tying back her hair. Out in the garden, colors had returned. Nothing fancy, just daisies, wild sunflowers, crooked lines of marigolds planted by small hands. The soil didn't hold grief anymore. Now it held growth. Leonard knelt by the rosebush he'd planted months ago. It had grown taller than he expected, thorns sharp, petals opening anyway. "Smells like her," he said softly. Jennifer looked at him. Her eyes didn't ask which her he meant. She just nodded, then sat beside him. Close. Not too close. The twins chased each other between rows, giggling until one tripped and they both fell into the grass. Neither cried. They just laughed harder. And from where he sat, Leonard watched them, knees scraped, hair wild, faces bright. He remembered the day he'd found them under that kitchen sink, wet, loud, alive. He hadn't known then what it meant, but now he did. Healing didn't come all at once. It came like this. One broken plate, one bedtime story, one whispered nickname, and a woman who didn't try to replace what was lost. She simply stayed long enough to help them remember what remained. That evening, as the house settled, Jennifer stood in the kitchen, the family mug in her hands again. Leonard walked in behind her, arms folded, watching her in the warm, low light. "What are you thinking?" she asked without turning. He took a moment, then said quietly, "This house, it used to echo. Now it hums." She looked at him, eyes full, still cautious, but soft, and he added almost to himself, "I never thought it could again." Jennifer didn't reply right away. She reached for his hand, linked her fingers with his. "I didn't come here to change anything," she said. "I just didn't want the quiet to win." Leonard looked at her, and for the first time, didn't feel like a man trying to fix something broken. He felt like someone learning to build again, from the inside out. The house hadn't changed its walls, but within them, everything was different. It no longer echoed with loss. It hummed with life. and laughter had come home to stay, and if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that healing takes time, that love can return to quiet places, or that even broken homes can bloom again, then stay with us. Here at Elevated Heart Stories, we tell the kind of stories that remind you what it means to feel, to remember, to hope. So if you haven't yet, subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know where you're watching from, because somewhere out there, someone else needs this story too, and maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for a little light to come back in.